below them that are just a little bit lower so you can have your traffic in them. But meanwhile, you've got these deeper alleyways. So I'm going to work on those in some future videos. In addition to being a platform you can use just as a scene, or use as a city block, or as an alleyway, they also open up. They also open up. They also open up to put your terrain in when you're done. In addition, I did prototype one of them to have an entire interior playable so that you can have adventures in a city block. So you could use this as a basement under a house, whichever. Just part of a dungeon. So come along with me while I put a whole bunch of bricks on this stuff.
So my good friend Cross and I came up with the idea of doing these raised city blocks practically at the same time, and I went on and I made several of these. But when I was watching Cross's episode, what a genius! He came up with the idea of sticking a top and detailing the inside of these. Never even gave that a thought. Cross, well done, but you've inspired me. So, running with Cross's idea, I have made myself 2 lids to my city terrain blocks. I'm going a slightly different route. I have flocked my upper surface. I've done 2. I've done one for my 20 by 20 box, and I've done one for my 10 by 20 box. So I, in theory, have stonework if I want it, and also I can flip this over and drop that into the to the box there. There we go, and it's a good, nice, tight fit. Because I was originally going to make a whole new bunch of blocks which were your flat grassy field, and now I have saved a lot of work. So thanks Cross, you are a genius. And if you guys haven't ever checked out his channel Campaign Terrain, I'll stick a link down below. Go visit him, subscribe, because he does some great stuff with EVA. Now, as far as Cross doing the inside, I am going to give that some thought yet. I'm not sure where I would want to go with that. I do like his idea of doing the like the internal dungeon stuff, but I've already done my basic modular dungeon, so I might give some consideration to that. However, what I do want to do, along with making these 2 tops, so I also flocked up some scrap pieces of EVA. I'm going to chop those out now to make some modular rocky outcroppings to go on my terrain. So I'll show you, run through that now. Here we go.
So the first real task here is just to take this piece of scrap EVA that I've flocked and hack it up into some random chunks that will form the grassy tops of these rock outcrops that I'm going to make for the terrain. Now, if you have never seen my rock making process, it is just get down and dirty brutal with the scrap EVA, and just keep scoring through it. You don't want to cut all the way through all of the time, but I am actually going to do some deeper cuts which will go part of the way through, because then I'm going to start tearing it apart. Now, as you can see, these smaller chunks that I have torn off from the larger bulk, I slide the knife into them, just making slightly more refined cuts, and then I tear out the smaller pieces of that foam, and what I'm left with is something that looks a little bit like this. Now, initially I did put a sort of a support piece on the underside of my first raised rock, structure, but I actually didn't need it as I moved on with the project. This next stage of the process is pretty straightforward. It's just hack, cut, slice, and rinse and repeat, working around the flatter upper surfaces to just build up interesting structures. I guess one of the key sort of features I was after with these rocky outcrops is that there was a slight slope to the flat surface, upper surface. So the rock bits that I'm cutting now get gradually smaller to one end or the other of those pieces, so that there is a slight slope. I did test this out by putting a miniature on it to make sure that it still stood there. But what I was trying to really avoid was that kind of flat-topped structure. I just felt there was more dynamic with this sort of jutting rock piece.
Okay, so here we go. This is my rocky texture process. You've seen it loads of times, but I thought I'd just give it a quick run through in the steps to take. So first of all, some greaseproof paper. Drop that down. Here are the 4 pieces that I am going to texture. Now obviously, because there was a time constraint at the time, so all of the grassy surface is already flocked. So it's this EVA that I'm going to deal with right now. At the moment it's still squidgy and soft and spongy, and we don't want that to be the case. We want them to be really nice and hard, as rock should be. So PVA is the sealant of choice. I put it on the greaseproof because then I can just put out a nice big fat dollop of PVA and start coating all of the pieces, and that's what I'm going to do now. So set something interesting up on the TV to watch, or an audiobook, podcast, whatever your jam is, and then just start going in with a really nice, thick, generous of PVA. That is the secret here. And what we're actually doing is sealing the PVA, which has a slightly porous texture surface to it, to prepare it for the subsequent layers of texture. Admittedly, PVA is not the fastest drying sealant. If you want something faster, possibly Plasti-Dip, but that's an expensive route. You can also use a hot gun over the PVA to speed it up, because PVA dries through a relationship with heat. I tend to stick it out on a sunny day, stick it out on a windowsill or outside on the table, and it'll dry a lot faster, sometimes within an hour if it's in the height of the summer. So my next bit of texture is this plaster, which is a very fine kind of plaster, the kind that you use on plastering walls, not the kind you use for making plaster molds. So it's very cheap, get it out of any building suppliers. It does require a little water to get it going. So just got my little spritzer bottle here with just some water in, and that will activate the plaster. Doesn't need much. And then the second material that I put on is vermiculite, which is this. It's like a ground up cork, relatively fine grain ground up cork, and just sprinkle this on. I tend to focus this around the base of rocks, but it doesn't matter if it goes higher up. There we go. That's another one done.
So once all that texturing has been applied, I just stick it outside. It was a nice sunny day, and get it to dry. And then I hand painted all of the rocks with a base black. I had to hand paint them because I couldn't spray them because of the upper surfaces already being flocked. So once that black is dry, and I use a masonry paint for that in actual fact, but once that's dry, I then lay in a really nice dark deep brown. This is a burnt umber mixed with a little bit of black, and I just give the good heavy coat all over the rocks. I'm not looking for a solid pass of colour, just let some of the black still show through. But yeah, just go over the whole thing, give it a nice deep colour. I use a small brush here so that I can get into all those little nooks and crannies. My next colour of choice is this sort of light tan colour, which is basically a yellow ochre with a little of that brown in there as well, just to still muddy it up a little. And again, I'm going around, it's not a dry brush, it's a fairly heavy brushing, but just not as much cover as the previous colour. And I think this is the secret to rocks, is to play with colour and not be afraid to play with that colour. Ultimately, I want these bluey grey rocks, but I'm working here with browns and tans to start off with, because that will set up a sort of an excitement to the eyes almost, because you've got this warm temperature and cool temperature colours that will play off against each other in the final thing. So, as I just said, I actually want these rocks to have a bluey grey kind of colour to them. So once all the acrylic paints are dried, I go in with an oil wash. The oil that I'm using is a mix of ultramarine blue and black, and just plenty white spirit, a pea-sized dollop of each of the two colours, plenty of white spirits, about half-inch deep in that little tumbler there, you can see, and then just go around and start laying in the washes. Now, one of the things you'll notice is, first of all, I'm actually putting that wash across some of the grasses as well. That's just because I want the underlying look of the rocks to feed through the grasses. But curiously, when I had actually put these rocky outcrops to dry outside, I inadvertently forgot about them, and it rained. And the Gig Gaming Scenics flock that I'd used just desaturated, like all the colour washed out of them. There was this lovely spring green colour all over the tabletop that I'd left them on. So I'm actually going to re-flock a little back onto the top of those surfaces there. And then we're on to the actual sort of dry brush stage itself, and that's a nice pale yellow, which is basically a cad yellow with plenty of white, hardly any yellow at all, and cad white. And as you probably already know, you take most of the paint back off the brush and then lightly dust across the surface of the rock. Now you'll notice I'm using a downward stroke, downward in relation to the rocks themselves. And that's because this is a highlight, it is the effect of light hitting the rocks. So it's coming from above, so we want the light parts to hit the upper surfaces.
So here we go, all of the painting's done. It's time for me to get some grassy tufts and just apply those. Fairly quick process, do some photography, show you the beauty shots. I'd just like to give everybody a big thank you. If you like the channel, please remember to like it, subscribe it. Don't forget to hit that notification bell as well, of course. That makes the channel work. If you really want to help out the channel, you could head over to my Patreon. I'm doing a big overhaul on my Patreon at the moment and updating all of the benefits, so there's going to be some new stuff available over there, and you can do that for as little as £1 a month. You could head over to my website, seancowney.com, check out my prints. You know, just head over to worldwarfay.com and sign up to the newsletter. I've got a Kickstarter, that's a teaser, but it's not till next year. So yeah, that's it. Thanks guys. I will finish this up now and roll with the beauty. Take care. Bye.